This is Approximate Rationality and Ideal Rationality by Zhang. And this is out of the Asian Journal of Philosophy. And this is a book symposium. So they're talking about a book and they're talking about that stuff. So this isn't going to be like, you know, one idea. They're going to be talking about a few things here. But that doesn't mean we can't like discuss it. So let's see what this is. And we're going to talk some Bayesianism. And I know we got a nice raid from Ivan. Thank you again, Ivan. And Ivan likes talking Bayesianism. So we can talk about that. Here we go. And as always, ask me questions along the way. I'll try to answer them if I can. And we review rate the paper at the end. According to standard Bayesianism, rational degrees of belief are probabilistically coherent, probabilism, and evolve by Bayesian conditionalization, conditionalization. One immediate worry about this view is that it seems too demanding. For instance, probabilism entails that one should be at least as confident that 1,234,567 days after January 1st, 2023 is February 18th, 5,403, as one is about all the basic arithmetic and calendar facts. Yeah, I guess. So if you know calendars and you know math, you can find out that whatever that the 2 days are, how far they are apart. But most of us are much more confident in the latter than in the former. Yeah, so you're better at basic math than knowing what days in the future. And this seems entirely rationally permissible. If a principle of rationality says otherwise, then at the very least it's targeting a notion of rationality too remote to be relevant for us. Let's call this the irrelevance objection. And so this footnote here, I don't know if you can see like the small text. It says that a lot of theories of rational degrees of belief are subject to this sort of objection, that there's going to be things that you should know under that theory of rationality that you don't think you know. Okay. One reply to the irrelevance objection is to say that Bayesian norms are ideal norms worthy of approximation. Perhaps no one can live a perfectly healthy lifestyle, but such a lifestyle is still worth approximating. The closer one's lifestyle is to being perfectly healthy, the healthier one is. Similarly, the thought goes, the Bayesian norms are ideal norms, norms that our credences should obey in order to perform their roles in the best possible ways, without interference from limiting factors such as processing time or possibilities of error. No one can have credences that obey these norms, since no one can operate without these limiting factors. Nevertheless, epistemically speaking, these are still norms worth approximating. The closer one's credences are to satisfying the Bayesian norms, the more rational they are. Call this the view approximate Bayesianism. And if you don't know, now you know. Noger. While approximate Bayesianism has precedence in the literature, Unsettled Thoughts Hereafter UT is the first book-length account of this view with admirable formal rigor and philosophical depth. Okay, so that's what we're talking about. We're talking about a book defense of the idea that none of us are going to be perfect Bayesians, but the idea is that perfect Bayesianism is the norm to which we are trying to attain. That's what we're going after. I feel that Ivan would agree with this sort of view. I mean, yeah, I don't know. I don't think he's in chat anymore, but because usually I say his name enough, he shows up. But Ivan Neo. Ah, well, he's not Beetlejuice. I guess I knew that. But yeah, so okay, but this is good. The starting premise of UT, that's Unsettled Thoughts, is that we can measure the degree of incoherence of a credence function by its divergence from the set of coherent credence functions, which is given by the minimum of its divergence from the members of that set. This can be generalized to measuring degrees of irrationality of credence functions when there are multiple rational norms, though there are substantive choice points involved, and also degrees of propositional irrationality of creedal revisions. In particular, if an agent starts out with a rational prior but fails to update according to the rational procedure, that is Bayesian conditionalization, then the degree of irrationality of their update is given by the divergence of their posterior credence function to the set of credence functions permissible by rational procedure given their priors and evidence. Yeah, so if they have like a few different ways that they could go according to what they think, and one of them is the correct Bayesian one, correct in quotes, then like you can say, well, how far away did their procedures get them? Fine. One significant payoff of this framework is that we can now prove mathematical results that make precise the idea of that rational norms, and in particular Bayesian norms, are worthy of approximation. For instance, one can prove that for a wide class of divergent measures that we can use to measure incoherence, reduction in incoherence leads to a decrease in Dutch bookability and an increase in accuracy. And if people don't know what Dutch bookability is, it's a betting strategy where heads I win, tails you lose. And so it's like where someone doesn't understand the actual probabilities in the world, and so you can exploit their lack of knowledge or lack of mathematical. Hey, Maddie, what's up? Yeah, so it technically is very dirty. A Dutch book argument is what the English called it, because the English came up with better mathematics for probability than the Dutch knew, and so they'd cross over the English channel, go to some Dutch bookmakers and fuck with them and just get a lot of money, and so it collapsed the stock market or whatever hundreds of years ago. So it was dirty, but yeah, it's not and so it's technically anti-Dutch slur. From hundreds of years ago, saying how stupid the Dutch are, because it's English who are saying how stupid the Dutch were. English won, Dutch, yeah, exactly. Minus 29. So, but yeah, so the point is, when you do not understand the correct probabilities in the world, then you can, or no, when you are getting the probabilities wrong, then you can like always win, or you can always lose to someone who does understand them, because you can make a betting scheme. They'll say, oh, I'll give you this amount of money if you win over here, and I'll give you this amount of money if I win over there. But what they don't know is that heads I win, tails you lose. So like, even if I win over here, you're going to lose over there, or even if I lose over there, I'm going to win over here. So yeah, a Dutch wife is a mistress. Is that like true? Is that word for Dutch wife? Yeah. The Dutch angle. Okay. All right. And that's last anyone dunked or anyone else on math at a cultural level. Yeah. On maths at a Dutch angle. That's probably not true, I guess. But like, it's very nerdy. So yes. But the English were making a lot of money off them. So yeah. I did not know that Cinemax. That's an interesting thing. Yeah. I did see a meme recently where it says, set the language on your phone to Dutch. And it's just very entertaining because the words are kind of like English, but like they're just sort of entertainingly different. Has come to mean same-sex partner. Interesting. So what's the story behind the Dutch oven? I don't know, Vipers. I mean, there are like cast iron things that are called Dutch ovens, and you can cook in them when you go camping. But there are many other Dutch ovens too, which some more interesting than others, or some more pleasant than others. But how you doing, Vipers? Welcome in. And yeah, welcome in, Maddie Holmes. So yeah, so the whole point is that if you had the correct understanding of the way the world was, you could not lose even in probabilistic situations, or you could make the best choice in probabilistic situations. The Dutch word for thingamajig is huppeldepup. Yeah, this is why I said that's just very entertaining to a native English speaker. So that's why they said, like, change your phone language to Dutch, and it's just very entertaining. Dutch oven joke. Yeah, you smell a fart joke. There's a lot of jokes. So there's the World War II joke about, like, where did Jews die? Well, Dutch ovens. There's sex jokes about Dutch ovens too. And then there's, maybe fart jokes. So those are the three off the top of my head that I know. But some, like I said, some more less pleasant than others. A Dutch programmer friend of mine named one of his libraries on your suggestion huppeldepup.js. That's actually really funny. Yeah. Well, good suggestion, Vipers. You done well that day. But yeah, we're reading a paper on approximate Bayesianism here. This is a book symposium, so they're just discussing a book. But like, it seems interesting. So it says, we don't actually know all the priors and what exact Bayesianism would say, but we're trying to get close. So what's the best? Then we can have different measures for how far away we are from the actual, like, Bayesian result when we do know. And then you can measure who was closer and farther away from the Bayesian outcome. Okay, so Author continues, it is beyond the scope of any paper to give a comprehensive discussion of the many deep and interesting issues raised by the book. Instead, I shall focus on one question that was not addressed explicitly in the book: how to reconcile approximate Bayesianism with the possibility of non-transparent learning situations. Situations where one does not learn facts about what one does or does not learn. So you're not learning anything like meta level. You're not learning about what you're doing, or you're not learning anything about what you didn't learn. Okay, many think that non-transparent learning situations are possible, though it's more controversial whether they are possible for ideal agents. There's a tension between approximate Bayesianism and the possibility that learning is non-transparent because, as many have pointed out, in cases where an agent finds themselves in non-transparent learning situations, it is unclear that the Bayesian norms are even worth satisfying, let alone approximating. What do we got here, Vipers? Ah, wrong button. Why? Click. Dutch is not a serious language. Spank me, daddy. Give me in clap, papa. Give me in clap. Yeah, give me a clap, papa. Yeah. That's, yeah. So, again, like I said. And nothing against. What's funny is I've been watching a Dutch language streamer, and she says constantly that that's why she streams in English, because she's Dutch, but she's like, our language is terrible. Like, she's like, Dutch is not a good language. It's kind of funny. It's like you don't normally hear people just like crapping on their own like mother tongue. She's just like, no, Dutch is not good. It's like, it's just not. So, she's funny. Okay. Yeah, so the question is, if like you don't know what's going on and you can't update, then what's the point of trying to be Bayesian? But yeah. Alright. So this is the non-transparency challenge, because it's thought that you could be in a situation where you don't actually know anything about anything to learn, so you can't update. But then if there are situations where you can't do Bayesian updating, can you say that Bayesianism is fundamental? So that's the question. Netherlands is Mistin's 10% English. Yeah, something like that. There's a reason they speak English in the Netherlands. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what she was saying too. He says, even though like English is not the best, like no one really loves English, I don't think, but like they dislike Dutch. Like there's an active dislike of Dutch, which is funny. I've never heard that anywhere else, where they're just like, man, Russian sucks, I hate speaking. You don't hear Russians say that. You don't hear like Americans saying English sucks. Like, not. You might hear them say because they're stupid and don't realize that American is actually English, but that's not the point. Like you don't hear Spanish speaking people like, Spanish is terrible. It's like they don't say that. So you don't hate Dutch, yeah? Well, are you a Dutch speaker? Special moment. It's just funny because I have heard the Dutch just be like, yeah, it's not great. Because I've been in a Elisa Praise stream. If you do speak Dutch, you swear with diseases. Okay. It's all the spitting required to speak it. Ah, maybe. Yeah, maybe that's it. It's like a sort of like an unpleasant language. Doesn't feel. It's just gauche. Yeah, see, I don't know these things. But someone else Dutch came in. They're like, oh, wait, are you Dutch? And they're like, she's like, yes, I am. And they start typing in Dutch, and like then the other person's just like, yeah, let's stick to English. It's like, yeah, let's just stick to English. It's like, okay. Like, it was funny. Like both the Dutch people were like, no, let's not talk Dutch. Okay. In the literature on standard Bayesianism, there are two main responses to the non-transparency challenge. And remember, the challenge is that if there are situations where Bayesianism doesn't apply, that's a problem for saying Bayesianism is fundamental. Pick the cat up. Well, there we go. See, that's very fine. Okay, concede that Bayesian conditionalization is not an ideal norm in non-transparent learning situations, or insist that it is, despite the fact that it doesn't promote alethic or practical value. I argue that neither response has straightforward approximate versions in Stafel's framework. In particular, both are in tension with the systematization view of the Bayesian method, according to which ideal norms are systematizations of our common sense platitudes of rational credences. I conclude by sketching an alternative view of the Bayesian methodology in response to the irrelevance of objection. Or Descartes Opaken. Okay, yeah, so pick it up is the cat up pick. Up picking. Yeah. I like that. Up picking. So your pickup is up picking. Okay, the non-transparency challenge. Let's start with the toy example adopted from the Monty Hall problem that appears to involve non-transparent learning situations. So Monty Hall is a classic problem. I've even talked about Monty Hall before. I actually maintain that my everyday discussion of it is better than, like, my everyday discussion is better than other everyday discussions of it. Oh, but of course the mathematics has been worked out for a long time. That's the statistics store thing, right? Yeah, they're going to talk about it like right now. So like, I can see it coming. It's just, I just want to brag on that. Like, I think my explanation is better for my explanation is better than I think other people's, aside from like the mathematics of it, which have been known for many years. Okay, the Monty Ball. So this is a variant on Monty Hall. This is the Monty Ball. There are 3 doors, A, B, and C. 1 has a car, 2 have goats. Monty Ball will show you 1 door that has a goat behind it. However, instead of simply opening the door, Monty Ball will communicate with you in a more indirect way by passing you a ball that both of you know weighs 1.9 kilograms, 2 kilograms, or 2.1 kilograms. If it weighs 1.9, then the car is behind the door. Then the car is behind door A. If it weighs 2 kilograms, then the car is behind door B, etc. Okay, so they're just telling you what it is? That's weird. Moreover, if the ball weighs 1.9 kilograms, then you'll be able to tell that it doesn't weigh 2.1 kilograms, but not that it does not weigh 2 kilograms. Similarly, if it weighs 2.1, then you'll be able to tell that it does not weigh 1.9, but not that it doesn't weigh 2. Lastly, if it weighs 2, then you'll learn that either that it doesn't weigh 1.9 kilograms or that it doesn't weigh 2 kilograms, depending on a factor that is perceptually undetectable by you, but can be controlled by Monty Ball. For example, he might subtly adjust the lighting to control your focus. That's weird. So like, there's a situation, if you're getting the middle option, then you can't tell, but like Monty's telling you that it isn't one of the others. Because like you can tell the difference between the one on the ends, but not the one in the middle. It's hard for you to tell. Okay. For simplicity, say Monty Ball can control this by pressing a high button that you learn doesn't 1.9 or a low button. You learn that it doesn't weigh 2.1. Okay, so if you get the low option, you can tell it's not the other ones. If you get the high option, you can tell the other ones. But if he hands you the middle one, he fucks with your head to tell you if it's not the high one or not the low one. So there's some indeterminacy if you get the middle option. Note that your learning situation as described in Monty Ball is non-transparent. For instance, if the ball weighs 1.9, then while you will learn that it does not weigh 2.1, you won't learn that it does not weigh 2. No, you'll not learn that it does not weigh 2, not 2.1. This is wrong. Since it's incompatible with what you learn that the ball weighs 2 kilograms and Monty Ball presses the high button. Yeah, so you don't know that, like, it could have been the 2, but like, then Monty's fucking with your head. In which case you won't learn that it does not weigh 2.1 kilograms. Yeah, so all the balls are interconnected. And so what you're learning depends on, there's always 2 options. Like, it could be that you got the light ball or that you got the middle ball and then Monty made you think it was not the heavy ball. That's all you know. Okay, so yeah, so no matter what the middle ball is, like, you don't know until Monty does something. You just let one rip and you realize the window was open because someone cheered. Oh, I'm sorry you don't get to smell it. I thought you were going to say you ripped your bong, but like, and you had your window open. I was like, that sounds like a good idea. You don't need to sit there and like smoke, but whatever. Okay. In cases like Monty Ball, updating by Bayesian conditionalization appears prima facie irrational and has undesirable consequences, both practically and ethically speaking. For a concrete illustration, suppose you start out with a uniform prior over the 3 possible locations of the car and are 50-50 about which button Monty Ball will press if the car is behind door B and the ball weighs 2 kilograms. Then, no matter what Monty Ball tells you, if you update on what you learned by Bayesian conditionalization, you will become more confident that the car is behind door B from 1/3 to 1/2 to be exact. Intuitively, this seems irrational. If you will be 1/2 confident that the door is behind door B no matter what, then why not be 1/2 confident now that it is behind door B? Moreover, revising your credence this way also makes you vulnerable to a Dutch book. A cunning bookie can buy from you a bet $6, a $6 bet that the car is behind door B at the price of $2, and after Monty Balls tells you that the door has a goat, sell you the same bet back at the higher price of $3. Assuming that your credences correspond to your fair betting quotients, both bets will seem fair to you at the time when they are offered, and yet by your own lights, the bookie stands to gain $1 from you no matter what, and it can do so without even knowing what Monty Ball tells you. Yeah, so again, this is where there's indeterminacy given the middle option. So even though you learn something, you don't know what you learned, and so you can't update your credences. But it seems like you have learned something because you have gained new information. But the information is ambiguous. So I guess ambiguous information for Bayesianism is saying that this is not good. Okay. And so you can be screwed over in a betting scheme because of this. Lastly, given certain natural assumptions about how to measure the accuracy of credences, one can show that there are uncountably many alternative ways of revising your credences that have higher expected accuracy than Bayesian conditionalization. Yeah, so again, you could ad hoc make a scheme that makes this scenario work out. For example, suppose inaccuracy is measured by the Breyer score. Then the revision strategy described by the matrix on the right, where Qi represents the credence function you will adopt at W1, has higher expected accuracy than Bayesian conditionalization described by the matrix on the left. Yeah, so I guess like they're saying that in this situation where you've got ambiguity in your updating, then there's a better strategy to take than is given by the Bayesian one. Okay. So granting cases like Monty Ball are possible, then there are possible cases where updating by Bayesian conditionalization is 1. Intuitively irrational, 2. Dutch bookable, and 3. Less accurate than alternative ways of revising one's credences. The non-transparency challenge is then the challenge of either explaining why Bayesian conditionalization is still the ideal norm worthy of approximation in such cases, despite 1 through 3, or identifying an alternative ideal updating norm in place of Bayesian conditionalization. Before proceeding, let me consider 2 replies to the non-transparency challenge in order to set them aside for now. First, one might think that Monty Ball is impossible, at least for ideal agents. You remember, the guy had to make you believe something in your head by flipping a switch. For instance, one might have an internalist conception of learning, according to which facts about one's total evidence supervene on mental facts that are accessible by introspection. On this view, if the ball weighs 1.9 kilograms, then the strongest proposition that you learn is not that the ball doesn't weigh 2.1, but something like it appears that the ball doesn't weigh 2.1. Crucially, the thought goes, this proposition is incompatible with the possibility that the ball weighs 2 kilograms and Monty Ball presses the high button, since at that possibility it won't appear that the ball doesn't weigh 2.1, it would appear to you that the ball doesn't weigh 1.9. Yeah, so this is just a fancy way of saying it's impossible that Monty can flip a switch and make you believe something. But like, yeah, if you have a conception of learning or knowledge that's internalist, meaning you're reading your own mental states, then him flipping a switch is impossible because that's not how knowledge works. Okay, as noted before, whether cases like Monty Ball are possible for ideal agents is controversial. Fortunately, the force of the non-transparency challenge for approximate Bayesianism does not rely on settling this debate either. One important virtue of approximate Bayesianism is precisely that it applies to non-ideal agents like us. Even if learning for ideal agents is always transparent, it seems quite plausible that non-ideal agents can fail to properly introspect when they have what they have or have not learned. Perhaps one is disposed to take information only at face value. Perhaps one doesn't even have the relevant conceptual resources to reflect on higher order facts about their own learning experience. Moreover, we also make comparative judgments about which update is more or less rational in such cases. For instance, even if updating by Bayesian conditionalization is not ideal, it still seems more rational than, for example, being certain that the ball weighs X kilograms if you can tell that it doesn't weigh X kilograms. It is therefore incumbent on any theory of graded rationality to say what norms are worthy of approximation for non-ideal agents who find themselves in such learning situations. Yeah, I mean, this is such a weird situation that it's non-ideal. Of course, we're in non-ideal situations. Like, you don't actually have to worry about this most of the time because this is not something... The specificity of this example is contrary to the style of argumentation of a non-ideal agent. So the fact that we're non-ideal and we're trying to approximate an ideal, and then they're saying, well, there's another ideal. It's like, well, yeah, there is another ideal. That's not what we're talking about here, because that's an ideal thing. We're non-ideal agents. So it's sort of like misguided. I mean, that's fair. I don't know if this is great, and I don't know if I got this 100% right, but I get the general gist of this argument here. It's like, we're non-ideal things, and then you're saying this very specific weird case where it doesn't work for the ideal case. It's like, well, we're not talking about the ideal case here. We're talking about what people can actually do. Okay, second one. Yeah, if anyone has questions about that, let me know. Like when we're dealing with technical issues like this, it gets a little sticky. You can get in the weeds. Again, but the basic idea is that if there's ambiguity in the update, well, what do you do? And so any learning could like misguide you. But again, the ambiguity identified here is really a very strange ambiguity. It's like it's a forced one, basically. And so the fact that it's a forced ambiguity means it's like, well, that's not the world we live in either. Okay. Second, one might think that learning is necessarily transparent for both ideal and non-ideal agents. In particular, even if one only takes evidence at face value or one fails to attend to conceptualize higher order facts about one's learning experience, one's evidence is still the same as one's more sophisticated counterpart, and the rational response to that body of evidence is Bayesian conditionalization. So in Monty Ball, if, say, the car is behind door A, then what you learn at that possibility is not that it is not behind door C, but that you learn from Monty Ball that the car is not behind door A, which, given your background knowledge, corresponds to the disjunction that the car is behind door A or is not behind, or is behind B, and Monty Ball presses the high button. One can show that Bayesian conditionalization on this proposition and its analogs doesn't have the counterintuitive consequence, is immune to Dutch books, and maximizes expected accuracy. Okay, so if you have a combined Bayesian update with this whole situation more in mind, then you're okay. So it's not even a problem. Author says, I think this line of thought is much worth exploring, but let me flag one counterintuitive prediction of this view. Suppose in Monty Ball, the car is in fact behind door A, so your perceptual experience of the ball rules out that the car is behind door C. A highly reliable but not infallible bystander then tells you that Monty Ball pressed the high button. Intuitively, given what you learn, you are not in a position to tell whether his testimony is false. Remember that all you have is the ball in your hand. Yeah, remember, again, another ambiguous thing. They're saying highly reliable but not infallible, so it's ambiguous whether they're right or wrong. Assuming that you are always in position to tell P if your evidence entails P, then it follows that your evidence doesn't entail that the testimony is false, which is contrary to what the above view predicts. On that view, when you learn that the car is not behind door C, you also learn that the car is not behind door C, which entails that Monty Ball did not press the high button, and so that the testimony is false. Okay. So you're taking your stuff over someone else's, even though they're highly reliable. So that makes it a little bit, it's a little hard because you are always assuming that your update is more correct than someone else who's highly reliable. I mean, that's fair, but you might not think that's right because, again, why are you always assuming that your update is correct when you only have ambiguous information? Or not ambiguous, but complicated information. Okay, let me make a side note for before moving on. Although this paper focuses mainly on approximate conditionalization as a norm for creedal revision given empirical evidence, a similar challenge arises for approximate probabilism and logical learning as well. Consider the logical students Una and Sarah. Neither has found a proof for P, which is, unbeknownst to them, a classical tautology. Una assigns a middling credence of 1/2 to P, where Sarah assigns a full credence to P. Stafel suggests that Una's credence in P is less propositionally rational than Sarah's, but perhaps more doxastically rational. The underlying thought is presumably that it is propositionally rational for one to be certain of P if one's total evidence entails P, and since P is a logical tautology, is entailed by Sarah's total evidence. However, if this is right, then it also follows that it is propositionally rational for Una and Sarah to be certain that it is propositionally rational for them to be certain that P, since their total evidence entails that the total evidence entails logical tautologies. More generally, on the Bayesian model, if we take logical learning as learning a tautology, then logical learning is necessarily transparent for both ideal and non-ideal agents. But intuitively, this is the wrong verdict. After all, Sarah's epistemic situation feels importantly different from someone, call her Vera, who has found a proof for P and knows that she has with certainty. If a reliable informant tells them that there is a proof for it, not P, then intuitively it is propositionally rational for Sarah, but not necessarily for Vera to be uncertain whether it is propositionally rational for her to be certain of P. Yeah, so I mean, if you were doing updates on the world and you are not sure of the way the world actually is, then it says, well, you're getting closer to it. But the problem is, so what? Like, you need a proof to show it in this case. The update is not a logical proof. And so it's like there's a disconnect there, and that's what they're saying here. So like this is approximate conditionalization, but like if you have actual updating with the perfect logic, then it's different. You've got a different situation at hand. So you have to be careful about like saying, all right, well, it's fine if you're getting closer to it, but like you also might get you're talking about two different things. You're talking about the metaphysical truth, like truth capital T about what is in the world, and then the epistemic or doxastic, what we know about it at the time. And those two things are coming apart here. This is an old problem, and they're just showing it in this area when you're talking about non-ideal agents, because the non-ideal agents don't have access to the way the capital T truth is in the world, but they're updating as best they can. But that's, of course, one's epistemic, Bayesian epistemology. It's not Bayesian metaphysics here. Okay. As noted above, the question of whether non-transparent learning situations are possible for ideal or non-ideal agents deserves more detailed discussion than I have space for here. For now, I'll take for granted that they are possible. Uh-oh, there goes the voice. For now, I'll take for granted that they are possible at least for non-ideal agents, because that's the epistemic case where we just don't know, not necessarily ideal metaphysical case. The question then is for agents who find themselves in such learning situations, what are the ideal norms of update worthy of approximation? In particular, is it still Bayesian conditionalization? Yeah, so if you've got these problems where things can come apart, is Bayesian still the thing we should be shooting at? Is Bayesianism? Okay, let's start with the affirmative reply. As mentioned earlier, one main challenge for this reply is to say why Bayesian conditionalization is worthy of approximation despite the fact that it is Dutch bookable and fails to maximize expected accuracy. One possible response to this challenge is to give a different analysis of worthiness. The challenge presupposes that worthiness is understood in consequentialist terms, but it need not be. For instance, one might think the worthiness of a credence function is measured by the extent to which it is correctly proportioned to one's total evidence. The closer a credence function is to the set of perfectly proportioned credence functions, the more valuable and rational it is. Excuse me. On this view, in cases like Monty Ball, although updating by Bayesian conditionalization does not promote practical or lethic value, it does instantiate maximal evidential value and is worthy of approximation to that extent. Yeah, so if you move the goalpost, you're saying, well, you're just doing best on what information you got. It's like, that's okay, but then you're losing Bayesian applicability to the universe. Yeah, so author says, however, I think this reply simply shifts the problem one step back. To see this, note that from the assumption that the epistemic value or worthiness, hey, I got something right. That's so fucking nice. Epistemic value or worthiness of a credence function for an agent S is measured by the extent to which it is correctly proportioned to S's total evidence. It does not follow that Bayesian conditionalization is the ideal norm of creedal revision. Yeah, so ideal would be worldly. So it's like, it separates from the ideal norm of revision. To get that conclusion, one also needs the substantive assumption that the credence function perfectly proportioned to S's total evidence is S primes prior, or some rational prior. I always forget what is. It's like ultimately rational. So, like, it means in the world prior. Conditions on S's total evidence. Not S primes, it's just S's. Sorry, I'm losing it. In particular, in Monty Ball, the probabilities given by Bayesian updates are better proportioned to your total evidence than the probabilities given by the updates that accorded with Q. But why? After all, intuitively, evidence is a guide to truth, and as we saw, updating by Q has a higher expected accuracy than updating by Bayesian conditionalization. So here's another way to put the challenge. Recall that the systematization view says that the ideal theories are systematizations of our common sense platitudes about rational credence based on what roles they play in our thinking and decision making. The ideal norms are norms that our credences obey when playing their functional roles in the best possible way. The above view amounts to focusing primarily and perhaps exclusively on the functional role of credences in matching evidential support. The ideal norms are norms that our credences obey when perfectly proportioned to our total evidence. Yeah, so we've got, again, the disconnect between evidential support in what we believe is our evidence, and then what is the actual total evidence that is not what we think of as the one that's actually supporting it, but it's like the total world. The task of systematizing our common sense platitudes about rational credences then reduces to the task of systematizing our common sense platitudes about evidential support. Yeah, how do you get from what we have about the world to like what we actually know? Okay, on the one hand, it seems that evidential support should be conservative. If you learn P and nothing else, then your total evidence doesn't support a different conditional credence given P. Bayesian conditionalization is the unique update rule that has this property. On the other hand, it also seems that evidential support should have some connections to truth and satisfies some version of the reflection principle. Yeah, so truths. So again, world. As we saw, Bayesian conditionalization violates these platitudes in cases like Monty Ball. Again, there's probably more to be said about this reply, but due to space constraints, let's move on to the second reply. Yeah, so again, what we're trying to do is get our update to match the world, not just what we think the world is like. So if you're updating your Bayesian rationality on your support, well, that's fine, but you chose the support and how to do it, and so that is a disconnect from the world. So it has to have some connection to the truth. So this is the whole thing right here. Evidential support should have some connection to truth, and note the should here. This is doing a lot of work. So like this should actually. Do I have anything? You can get this should right here. So yeah, that should is doing all the work. It's not just that we are updating on our what we think is support. The support actually has to relate to the world. Okay, again, there's probably more to be said about this reply, but due to space constraints, let's move on to the second reply. This reply concedes that Bayesian conditionalization is not the ideal norm of creedal revision in non-transparent learning situations. The natural question then is, what is the ideal norm for updating worth approximate in such learning situations? Note that this question is particularly pressing for the project of theorizing about degrees of rationality. For as aforementioned, even if we do not have a clear intuitive grasp of what update is update is ideal in such cases, we do seem to have some intuitions about comparative rational evaluations in such cases. In the framework developed in Unsettled Thoughts, these comparative judgments are explained in terms of relative closeness to the set of ideally rational credence functions. Again, what is the ideally rational credence functions? It's the ones that tell you how the world is. One proposal is that in cases like Monty Ball, the ideal update is not Bayesian conditionalization, but meta-conditionalization, which says that if the strongest proposition learned is P, then the agent should update by conditionalizing their prior on the proposition that the strongest proposition learned is P. In Monty Ball, then the ideal rational updating strategy is given by this matrix. What's up, Bowser? How you doing? Yeah, this is like high analytic philosophy where they're doing all the math to tell us what rationality is or how to describe rationality. So, yeah, not lots of notes to be taken. So we've got some mathematical matrix here to give us update functions on what we should learn in a given situation. In particular, if your perceptual experience rules out that the ball weighs 2.1 kilograms, then ideally you should be certain that your perceptual experience rules out that the ball weighs 2.1 kilograms. And yeah. and thereby be certain not only that the ball does not weigh 2.1, but also that the ball does not weigh 2 kilograms. And does not weigh 2 kilograms, and that Monty Ball pressed the high button. Even if you fail to be certain about this conjunction, everything else equal, the closer you are to being certain of this conjunction, the better and more rational your update is. Yeah, so if you understand the whole situation correctly, then you've got a better chance at updating correctly. Crucially, this is so even though you don't learn the second conjunct, for otherwise this reply collapses into the view that learning is necessarily transparent for both ideal and non-ideal agents mentioned above. Okay, so you still have to sort of figure it out, but you don't learn it. It's interesting. I'm not sure. Whatever. One problem with this reply is that it conflicts with our intuitive comparative rationality judgments. In general, it seems less, not more rational to be certain of things not entailed by one's evidence. Yes, this seems like you have to figure stuff out even though it's not entailed, which is a little weird, and that's what's going on here. Suppose you and your friend are about to watch a basketball game between Team A and Team B. The only thing that the two of you know is that in the past, the two teams have won equally frequently when competing against each other. You are 50-50 on whether Team A will win the game, whereas your friend is certain that Team A will win the game. Even if it turns out that Team A in fact wins the game, it seems that your middling credence is not less rational than your friend's certainty. If anything, their optimism appears less justified, even if it is eventually validated. Similarly, in Monty Ball, when all you learn that the ball does not weigh 2.1 kilos, it is intuitively less, not more rational, to believe, to be highly confident that Monty Ball pressed the low rather than the high button. Yeah, because what you're learning is one thing from your experience, and then figuring out what the other guy did, it seems a little less certain, because you have to like sort of understand other things going on. It seems less likely. There is also a more theoretical consideration. Note that even if we focus on the epistemic value of accuracy and the characteristic functional role of credences in estimating truths, what evidence the agent has is relevant for evaluating which updates are ideal and best promote accuracy. After all, again, so this is again taking the meta view as they said earlier. You have to evaluate the situation to judge what you are actually updating. After all, the most accurate credence function is the one that assigns certainty to the truths and nothing but the truths. Yet intuitively, being certain of the truth and nothing but the truths is not an ideal norm. It is certainly not a Bayesian norm. The challenge for this reply is to explain exactly why evidence constrains rational evaluation of updates based on their accuracy in such a way that rules out the omniscient rule, but not meta-conditionalization. Yeah, so it seems like they're saying, look, you don't know everything about what you're trying to reason about because there's ambiguities. But if you look at the overarching situation, you can reason about that and then decide what is actually the best thing to, Bayesian update. So the question is then, you are no longer in the ideal, like the non-ideal situation, since in moving to the higher level, you are now getting yourself into what is a theoretically okay, like a theoretically ideal Bayesian situation. So all of a sudden, it looks like, well, why are we doing this approximate Bayesianism when you could just go to the higher level and get just regular Bayesianism? So, interesting question. To take stock, the non-transparency challenge asks in non-transparent learning situations, what is the ideal update norm worth? What is the ideal update norm worthy of approximation? So it's like, but we're asking about the base level, not the meta level. One answer is that it is Bayesian conditionalization and is worthy of approximation if we understand worthiness in terms of the epistemic value of proportioning one's credence to one's total evidence. This reply faces the challenge of explaining why evidential support is given by conditional probability rather than alternative measures. So how do you get this meta level thing? On the other hand, if one concedes that Bayesian conditionalization is not the ideal norm worthy of approximation in cases like Monty Ball, then one needs to give an alternative ideal norm that is worthy of approximation and respects our intuitive comparative rationality judgments, as well as general principles of how evidence constrains evaluation of updates. I'm not arguing that neither can be done, but it's worth noting that the answers are not straightforward. Because if you always have the option to go to the meta level, then it looks like you always have a way to duck out of having a problem about ambiguities. But then it's like, well, how do you always have that option to do that? Because that's not Bayesian. That's like a logical operation or something. Just go to meta conditionalization. And so it seems a little not in the spirit of the conditionalization. It's like, yeah. Yeah, let's see. Evidence. Yeah. Okay, so how do you judge what is the evidential support? Well, then you have to go to the meta level, but that's not a Bayesian answer. Okay, I'm just double checking. Sorry. Let me conclude this section with a more high-level conjecture. The non-transparency challenge asks what are ideal epistemic norms in a class of epistemic situations. But what are ideal epistemic norms? According to Staffel, ideal epistemic norms are norms, quote, derived by thinking about characteristic roles our credences are supposed to play in our thinking and decision-making, end quote, and, quote, in developing the norms we abstract away from limiting factors that interfere with credences playing this role perfectly, such as processing or time limitations or possibilities of error, end quote. Now, as noted above, these limiting factors presumably don't include what evidence or propositional justification one has. Certainly in all truths is not an ideal norm, especially for Bayesians. Certainty in all truths is not an ideal norm, especially for Bayesians. However, and here is the catch, what evidence one has, and importantly, how it circumscribes the functional role that one's credences are supposed to play in a given epistemic situation, does seem to depend on these limiting factors, such as attention span, conceptual resources, possibilities of error. If this is right, if you go to the meta level, how are you supposed to do that? If this is right, then perhaps it is difficult to identify the ideal update norms for agents in non-transparent learning situations because those learning situations are in some important sense non-ideal. Their structures are partially determined by precisely the limiting factors that we are supposed to abstract away in ideal theorizing. The difficulty of addressing the non-transparency challenge then comes from the fact that we can't abstract away factors that are baked into the specification of the agent's epistemic situation. Yeah, so if every time you are trying to get out of an ambiguity, you have to go to a higher level, then you are going to constantly be getting new limiting factors. Like, how do you actually have access to all the information when you try to, like, well, this is ambiguous, let me go see what the information is that I do have? Well, that is going to again be limited by your understanding of the overall situation. So there's limitations that come back. Conclusion. We started with the irrelevance objection against standard Bayesianism. If we can't satisfy the Bayesian norms, then how are they relevant to us? Approximate Bayesianism is one reply to that objection. There are alternative replies. For example, one might think that true epistemic norms are in general relativized to an agent's cognitive resources and epistemic context. The Bayesian norms are defeasible generic norms that are true of us at a level of sufficient abstraction. I feel like Ivan could have said this sentence right here. The Bayesian norms are defeasible generic norms that are true of us at a sufficient level of abstraction. What's number 8? And this is what Staffel calls the scientific idealization view. I feel like that's very Ivan. Perhaps in general and everything else equal, rational certainty is closed under logical entailment, though this requirement could be defeated or weakened by considerations from high computational costs and or efficient distributions of cognitive resources. Crucially, in this picture, the Bayesian norms are not understood as ideals worth approximating, but themselves approximations of the true epistemic norms that are much more complicated, context-sensitive, and agent-relative. Of course, this is more of a picture than an actual view, and Staffel points out it raises some immediate questions that need to be addressed. In the end, my conjecture is that perhaps neither the systematization view nor the idealization view is the only correct way of thinking about the Bayesian methodology. Rather, to fully understand and theorize about epistemic norms that apply to us, we need both. On the one hand, in ideal circumstances, we non-ideal agents would be better off by approximating the Bayesian norms. On the other hand, in virtue of our non-ideality, we could find ourselves in epistemic situations that may not be possible for ideal agents, and for such cases, the Bayesian framework is only an approximate starting point from which we may begin. Okay. It's a little bit different than the last paper. Alright, so this is interesting because this is dealing with some very abstract theoretical problems with Bayesian rationality. Tommy, thank you for the subscription.
On the other hand, in virtue of our Twitch baby, we could find ourselves in metaphysical situations that are not only possible but necessary for ideal agents.
It's true. We're raising the future here. That's what our Twitch baby will be. We're raising the revolution. Thank you for the Vipers. Appreciate work this time. Yeah. Let's give Tommy a shout out. Anyone doesn't know Tommy. Tommy's a fellow philosopher out here on Twitch. Likes to play pew pew games, shooting people, and winner winner chicken dinner style things. So you can go over there, chat a bunch of stuff. He's does a bunch of like philosophical psychology. Well, not philosophical. Philosophy of mind, cognitive science, psychology, sorts of things. So yeah. What were we doing? Oh, we were rating this paper. But yeah, Tommy, how you doing? Thanks for the subscription. Yeah. We could find ourselves in metaphysical situations that are necessary for our to be ideal, and it's possible. I don't even know. What would be an ideal agent? I gotta go, like, after this amount of time reading papers on stream, my brain's gone. I'm like, what do I actually think about this? I can't remember what I think about this stuff, and I work on epistemology. Doing well, man. Hope the papers are going great. Awesome. Actually, I've got 4 papers under review, and I haven't thought about much of philosophy. I am thinking about some little bit of stuff right now, just to have my first new idea after taking a little bit of a break. So I was talking about that earlier, but like, frankly, as long as my papers are under review, I got nothing to do, and I'm feeling good about that. So I'm pretty happy about just waiting for the reviews to come back. I expect, as per usual, rejections mostly, but I hope they actually have something to say this time. But anyway, yeah, we had this nice paper on Bayesian rationality, and what are we supposed to do when there's ambiguity in our updating. It seems that this sort of discussion here, that's a lot. I know I had a really, really fucking busy first 6 months of this year. Like, I wrote a ton of stuff. Or no, I didn't write it. I did write a ton of stuff, but it was all getting completed at the same time, basically. And I had some deadlines, and so it's like I have a ton of papers out, and it's like I haven't done anything for weeks. And I'm only just starting to think about stuff now. It was a lot. I bet the Netherlands Journal of Philosophy is wild. I mean, they've got excellent schools in the Netherlands. I'm sure they're good. I know we crapped on the Dutch language a little bit today, but it's Twitch. Who cares? This won't ever go up on YouTube, and people won't ever see it. Anyway, as per usual, we give ratings here. Anything in the green is sort of a good rating. It'll give your overall average a boost. Anything in the red will drag it down. The vote nay drags your vote down. Vote yay just brings it up. And the vote meh kind of pulls everything to the middle. So, and Vipers, I need to write you a note to discuss this more. But like, this is what I've got now. So if it was fun and you thought it was good, give it a brain dance, gave you something to think about. Not extreme existential or artistic drama. This was all analytic philosophy. There's no existential or artistic drama here. Nagora for deeper ancient ideas. Nog knife, slicing and dicing arguments. This was a highly technical paper. It's going to be getting some knives out of me. Nog navel gazing only for academics. Nog turd, all style, no substance, still poop underneath. Nog grapes for big claims that shrivel up. And then, yeah, vote yay just as generic thumbs up, nay for down, and meh for very middle. So what am I going to do? I'm going to have to give this one some knives. I mean, just right off the bat. Nog knife. This is like high argumentation. They had mathematical matrices. They had they had flow diagrams of like the argument before. I don't know if you guys saw it like when I went by, but we've got like matrices we were going through. Here's comparative matrices, and then like you can maybe see it behind the emote review, but like it had like a little flow about your decision, like what you learn in the updating procedure. So yeah, so we're gonna get some knives out of this one. What else we're gonna do? I'm gonna give this a brain dance. I hadn't thought about some of these issues in Bayesian epistemology, but it is nice because I know other objections to Bayesianism, or I've heard like stuff in the past. It's not my area, but like this is at least something that will give me, if people ask like what's an issue with Bayesianism, I can say, well, you can at least look at this sort of thing, and why someone would say, look, Bayesianism is good, but like there's edge cases here. So that's part of it. So that, but in the end, also, it's gonna get some nog navels because only very silly academics and people like me and Ivan give a shit about this. So it's also gonna get like, yeah, I'll give it a nog naval one, but like that's fine. Now overall, should people be reading this vote yay, or is it like more of a vote meh? Like, yeah. So it's navel gazing. Add some fun ideas. Yeah, you're gonna get a vote meh. This is how I feel about this paper. Really analytic, had some good ideas, but mostly only for the silliness of academics or like people like me and Ivan that care about this sort of shit. Okay, so that's how I feel about it. Get your reviews in. If you have any questions, just let me know. Like, frankly, for something like this is not a badly written paper. Some of it got repetitive. Some of their jargon did get a little bit annoying. That's why it's not a straight up vote yay. Like, this is just, but then again, also, it was a book symposium paper. They were writing an argument about a book. You can't, like, it takes additional skill to have something like this be a lot of fun, to make it like a lot of like interest, as opposed to just, you know, hitting the highlights of your arguments and that sort of thing. It's like, yeah, we're talking about like not Monty Hall, Monty Ball. Like, all right, very cutesy. Snow Zhang, who are you, Snow? Do I know you? I don't know Snow. Berkeley, yeah. So Berkeley is yeah, a good school. So I don't know if they're like professor or if they're grad student, but like the good analytic philosophy. No Zhang. See if I go find who you are. Snow. Yep. This is yeah, Bayesian epistemology, decision theory, philosophy, probability, Chinese philosophy, research. Who is this? Assistant professor. Yeah, this is good stuff. Like, I mean, you may not like it, but like this is high quality sort of analytic stuff where you're melding both argumentation and mathematical practice with like argumentation. What is rationality? What are we actually trying to capture, with the technical ability to, you know, develop the mathematical matrices and like flow diagrams to show the reasoning. So it's like, yeah. Okay. Let's see. Like, I don't. Yeah. I mean, there were a few spots where they said, well, it's beyond my scope to talk about this stuff, but that happens. There's always sometimes where you're like, I'd like to talk about this issue more, but, you know, that's not the point of the paper. I don't know, I'm feeling a little bit bad about the meh. I'm going to also give it a vote yay on top of this. Like, I'm talking myself into a vote yay situation. It's okay. I've gone back and revised some of my reviews on a few things. I realized that I had been angry at some authors by the end of their papers, and they didn't deserve the grades they got. Because, like for instance, there was a paper where they said some stupid shit right at the end of the paper, and like that made me angry. But it's like, yeah, they said some stupid shit at the end of the paper, but the rest of it was really okay. So it's like, it shouldn't have been so bad, because like most of the paper was okay. How could a work like this be used to apply, or will remain mostly abstract? This will remain mostly abstract. The point here is, like, if we're gonna dedicate time and resources to understanding rationality and frameworks like Bayesian epistemology, which has a large following, and like this is how this is actually how we think rationality is. If this paper here has made some good arguments against Bayesian rationality, maybe we have to start thinking about, you know, what are other options, or how do we modify Bayesian rationality along those lines. And, you know, this is going to have major impacts on, you know, computer learning models and things like that, because if they're trying to understand what human rationality is like, which I think is the goal for a lot of computer science, machine learning applications, then it's going to have, like, this is like, well, what are we trying to accomplish? This is the sort of paper that says, well, what we're trying to accomplish is Bayesian rationality or something else. And so it's like, well, what are we actually aiming at? So this has actual very practical application to other fields, but this is the abstract work. So yeah. So this is very useful stuff if you are trying to make a model of human rationality that your large language model is supposed to approximate. So if you're trying to approximate rationality with a large language model, well, what are you trying to approximate? Well, this sort of scheme, and how do you actually do your machine learning? This matters here. Machine learning is mostly approximate. You better have some nice heuristics to get the job done. Yeah, and what are your heuristics? Which ones are you going to choose? What are you aiming at? Well, if you're aiming for a Bayesian thing, then you make your heuristics point in the Bayesian direction. So, like, that's the whole point here. It's that if the Bayesian schema falls under certain situations, well, what do? Are you building your machine learning to be wrong in those situations when a human would be right? And that's a problem.